idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes. All right. So, so we then, so we have staff that are, when a person has passed away, and they are able to give the gift of life through donation. So only about 1 out of 100 people die in a way that they are able to actually donate their organs. So just because you say yes to donation, you are not necessarily going to be able to donate your organs.
You're saying 1 out of 100 because of medical conditions?
No, because you have to die by brain death in order to be able to donate your organs.
You have to die by what?
Brain death. So when you have a traumatic injury to the brain,
right.
And so you're only then kept alive by being on life support. So when that life support is, when the ventilator is removed, the person is no longer going to be alive. So that is the only way you can donate your organs, because when you are on that ventilator, what it does is it keeps the heart pumping blood and oxygen to the rest of the body, and it keeps the organs alive until the organs can be recovered and then transplanted to somebody else. Okay, so that does not happen. Only 1 out of 100 people actually die in that way. So that does not happen that often. Now, anybody can donate tissue, and tissue includes things like skin, bone, your corneas, ligaments, tendons, veins. Those are all forms of tissue. And so something like skin is used for burn victims. So whenever somebody, they have a burn victim in a burn unit, they use skin instead of a bandage to help heal that burn victim, because skin is more natural, and it cuts down on infection. Okay, so anybody can be a tissue donor. Not everybody can donate their organs. Now, a lot of times people say too, well, I'm older, or what if I'm sick and I won't be able to donate my organs because, I'm too old. That is not true. So what I say to people is, if organ donation is a wish that you have, that you want, a gift that you want to give when you pass away, go ahead and say yes, because what happens is once that person passes away, so once the doctor has declared that you are brain dead, and they actually do, so in order for a person to be declared brain dead, they do 2 tests. So those tests are 12 hours apart, and they're done by 2 different doctors to check to make sure that the person is actually really brain dead. Okay.
You made a difference between tissue and organ. You said anybody can make a tissue donation?
Mm-hmm. So anybody can be a tissue donor. So you don't have to die by brain death to donate tissue. I'm sorry, what?
What do you mean by tissue?
So tissue is skin. Tissue is, yes, tissue is skin or bone, or your corneas. Those are all considered tissue. Cornea. So organs, yes. So organs are your heart, your lung, your liver, your pancreas, and your small intestine. So those are the organs. Okay. So now you can actually you see people volunteering to be a living donor. Like somebody will say, I want to donate one of my kidneys to my sister because the person's sister needs a kidney. So you can do that as a living donor, and people do that. People do that a lot. But you have to be a match. So you have to match that person by blood type. And then the other thing they look at is like the body size. So you have to be about the same size of the person that you're going to donate your organ to, so that the organ can function optimally in that person's body. Yes.
Does Life Center also facilitate the live?
So we don't do living donation. No, the transplant centers actually do that, because that's when somebody can step up as a volunteer and say, you can do that while you're still alive. When you are deceased, you don't get to choose who your organs go to, because they have to do a blood, to test for the blood. There's a short window of time where the organs are actually still viable once they're recovered, And so you're working against time when the person is actually deceased. And so you don't have that choice to say, well, you know, somebody in my family needs a heart. Well, what if the blood type doesn't match the person? You know, what if, even if it's your brother and you two don't have the same blood type, your organ is not going to match. If they were transplanted, your body would reject that organ because the blood type doesn't match. So that's why you can't designate as a deceased donor. So that's where Life Center comes in. And we actually do, we have the wait list, which is ran by UNO, so the United Network of Organ Sharing. So when somebody is on that waiting list, they go into the UNOS's database. And it's not even their name, it's just like their all their information. And so when the organ becomes available, what that system does is an algorithm, and it plugs in all those different criteria. So the blood type, how far the person is compared to the donor, the body size, and then how sick that person is. Those are the criteria that they look at. And then the computer will do an algorithm, and it'll you know, say, oh, this person is now at the top of the list. And we then will do the phone call to that person and we'll say, hey, a heart just became available. You need to get to the hospital within a couple hours, pretty much. Usually with a heart, the person has to be in the hospital already because that window of time is so short for a heart. So that's how that happens. And then, like I said, when the donor passes away, the doctors then do a thorough assessment of all the organs and tissue to make sure that they are viable enough to be donated. So if something was wrong with a donor's heart, they would not transplant it to somebody that's on the wait list. But just because something is wrong with the heart, the lungs could still be good, or vice versa, or the kidneys could be good. So that's why I say never rule yourself out as a potential donor, because the doctors at the time of death would do a thorough assessment of all the organs to make sure that they are viable enough to be transplanted to the recipient. And then even the recipient, they have to do a thorough workup to make sure that they're healthy enough to receive an organ once the organ becomes available too. So that's like a 3 to 6 month process that they have to go through in order to receive the organ. Because the last thing we want is when if somebody give that gift, for that gift to go to waste. So we have to make sure that that person is healthy enough to you know, receive that gift too. So yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yes, yes. And so a lot of times too, you know, people will say, well, if the doctors, if they know that I'm a registered donor, if something happens to me, they're going to be quick to pull the plug. They're not going to try to save me, right? But the doctors, so that doesn't happen because doctors have, like I just said, they have no idea you're a registered donor. That when you register, that list goes into a national registry that is controlled by UNOS. So it is not even controlled by the hospital. So the hospital can't even make a phone call to check to see if you are a donor or not. We actually, so our staff at Life Center can pull up the national registry. The only thing that the hospital staff does is the nurse will, every time somebody passes away, we have a call center. We get a phone call that says, this person has passed away, and then we look into the registry to see if that person is a registered donor or not. And then we let our staff know, we have another staff that will, if they are a donor, will go to the hospital and kind of walk the family through the whole process of what is getting ready to happen. With, you know, that their loved one was a donor. They're going to be taken to the operating room. The doctor's going to, so then the transplant doctor comes in and they do the recovery of the organs. And then we have a team. There's a person there for every organ that is available. So if all 8 of the organs can be donated, there are 8 transplant doctors in the operating room, because chances are they're going to 8 different places. And so those teams are there to transport the organs to where they go. And so we have staff that are coordinating all of that, because as you can imagine, that operating room is crazy at that time, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Things are moving as quickly as they should, so that the recipient can receive that organ in time. So yes. So any question for me, Grace?
No, you know, it's funny because I saw recently, I don't know where I saw it, a double lung transplant on television.
Yeah.
And the man was sick for a very, very long time. And they showed, you know, 3 hours, you had to quickly get the lungs and bring them over within 3 hours on whatever, they keep it on ice or whatever.
Yes, the lungs are kept on ice.
On ice. And by helicopter, because you only have 3 hours.
Yes.
And the thing that amazed me, after they made the transplant, when they hooked the lung to the person who really, his lung, they showed his lungs, they were like a piece of steak, a real small and red, dark red. And as soon as they hooked the new lungs, the lungs inflated.
Yeah.
Like a balloon. And it was all pink. It was amazing to see that lung inflate just suddenly.
Yeah, and working like a normal lung should, right? So you can imagine, right? You can imagine what that poor man was going through.
My God. It was like,
I hear that a lot from like kidney recipients that have been on dialysis for years. And the first thing they say, because with a kidney transplant, you start feeling better like instantly, right away. Like all of a sudden their eyes kind of clear. You can see like the whites of their eye. You can see like the color back in their face. And the first thing that they say is, oh my gosh, like I peed. Like I could pee. So like they can pee on their own and it's not an issue. So yeah, so it is true. I'm fascinated by donation, and I truly consider it a miracle that we're able to, like, people are able to do that, right? And so something I'll share with you, Grace. So my brother, 10 years ago, he was an organ donor. My brother was hit and killed by a drunk driver. So he died by brain death. But he was able to save 8 people's lives. Like all 8 of his organs were able to be donated and transplanted to other people. But just hearing the stories of the recipients that I never got to meet any, I've never met any of the recipients, but I did we wrote letters back and forth. But the gentleman that received his heart, I remember him writing saying he was able to go to his daughter's wedding. He was able, he's since passed away, but he was able to see his granddaughter, like meet his granddaughter. The guy that received one of his kidneys, he was able to go back to work full time and live a normal life. So it's just
it's like a second life.
It is. It is like a second life. And just knowing my brother and how my brother was such a generous, I mean, he would give the shirt off his back. I could just see him just like smiling like every day. like wow, look what I did, right?
He's partially in there.
Yes. Yes. So
that's very good. Sorry about your brother, but that's a good story though.
Yes. So
it is. There are 8 organs that can be donated. You're talking about 8.
So there are 8. Although we only have technically we only have 6, but so you have your heart, your lungs. So there are 2 lobes to the lungs, right? Sometimes a person would only need one of those lobes. So they can split them and it can go to 2 different people. And then your liver, your kidneys, and your kidneys actually do go to 2 different people. And that your small intestine and then your pancreas. So you are able to help 8 people. So one donor can actually save 8 people's lives. And then with if you are a tissue donor, you can actually touch up to 75 people's lives by just being a tissue donor alone. So yeah, so if you are an organ, eye, and tissue donor, you are able to help, over 100 people's lives just by being an organ, eye, or tissue donor. So it is truly a gift that you give back when you pass away. So yeah.
And after you receive an organ, you have to be on special medicine, as I understand it. Okay.
Yes. So you have to take anti-rejections medications for the rest of your life. Okay. Because what the medication does is it tricks your body into believing that it is your organ and not the donor's. So you have to take those for the rest of your life.
Even when the people are matched, when the donor and the recipient are matched, you still have to take medication.
Yep, you still have to take medication. So yeah. And then donation doesn't always, so a transplant does not always, it doesn't always last either. So you'll hear sometimes somebody will have a kidney for a few years and then that it'll fail and they'll need another kidney. So that has happened too, where you've had people that have received several kidneys or just were on the wait list for so long that they just never got that gift. And so they pass away waiting. We have 20 people that die each day waiting for an organ. Wow. So nationwide, there are 20 people that die each day in the US just waiting for an organ. And then we have over 109,000 people that are on the waiting list waiting for a donation.
That's pretty sad.
Yeah. So yeah. But
so you're busy a lot. I mean, you get information from the national as well as the local.
As well as the local. Yep. So I am. So I'm busy a lot. So what I do, Grace, is I actually I talk about donation to high school students too, because they are in the process of getting their driver's license. And that's where you make the decision when you go get your driver's license. They're going to ask, if you want to register or not as a donor. And most times the kids have no idea why they're asking them that question or what that means, what it means to say yes or what it means to say no. And so I, most days I'm presenting to kids in high schools about donation. Like this morning, I actually did, I did 6 presentations for Springboro High School today. Yeah.
And you register when you get your license, right? Your driver's license.
So you can register when you get your driver's license. Or if you never did that, you never had a chance to do that, you can register on our website. And you can actually, so people can change their minds. I tell them all the time, it is your choice. So if you want to change your mind, you can change your mind. You could do that on Life Center's website. You have the ability to do that.
And you can check your registration also, like, because I mean, I registered probably when I first got my driver's license, but I can't remember if they've asked me when I've updated my driver's license.
So they don't.
Okay.
So once you say yes, they don't ask you again. So that's the thing. If you want to change your mind, you have to go to our website to do it on the website. But you can check on our website too to see if you're registered or not. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, you first have to deal with the idea that you're going to die.
Well, and that's what most people can't come to grips with. Right. Most people can't come to grips that they're going to die. And I say to them all, if you can figure out a way for us to live forever, please let me know. Right. So, yes. So do you have any other questions for me, Grace?
I think I'm okay.
Okay.
I have to tell you, when I saw that lung fill up. It was like seeing a balloon that was just all of a sudden it just filled up.
You were fascinated by that, right?
Oh, it was amazing to see that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I mean, they had put it in already and they hadn't connected it yet.
Yeah.
And as soon as the connection came in, it was like unbelievable, unbelievable. I just saw this recently, maybe a week ago. I don't remember where. It would be something that you could show also to students.
You know what? I will have to look that up because they would be fascinated by that.
It was a man who was really very, very ill, and the family had almost given. He had, I think, if I remember, he had 2 daughters, and I think he was Hispanic, and I can't remember what part of the country it was. But just to see those lungs fill up, so beautiful and pink.
Yeah.
And the lungs he had were very dark red, and they were so small. He'd been on ventilators for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe it was ABC. Maybe it was ABC, one of those specials that they have. Nightline, maybe, I don't know. Whatever it was just amazing to see those lungs fill up.
I will definitely have to find that because my students would be fascinated.
Yeah. So your work is very important.
Yes, I like to think it is anyway.
Well, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Do you want to cover the religious part for her?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, if you have some sort of insights into that.
Yeah, so actually this is something that is really discussed in the Jewish community because there is a lot of misconceptions about what Judaism allows.
Yeah.
And mostly because of what you said at the beginning, Grace, that we have to take care of our body. And there's some other reasons that people are hesitant as well. There's the idea that when the Messiah comes, that there will be a resurrection. And there's a misconception that I shouldn't say it's a misconception. The understanding is that when there is a resurrection, you have to have all of your organs to be resurrected correctly. And that's why actually there's a lot of Orthodox Jews and a lot of Israeli Jews who don't sign up to be organ donors because of that. But actually, all the entire Reform movement, the entire conservative movement, and almost every Orthodox sect, not only encourages organ donation, but says that it's a mitzvah, a commandment that we should sign up to be organ donors. There's actually an organization, which might actually be interesting for you too, Audrey. It's called HODS, Halachic Organ Donor Society.
Really?
Are you familiar with that, Grace?
No.
So it's a nonprofit that's run by Orthodox Jews, and they go out and they educate other Orthodox Jews about the importance of organ donation. And they sort of make it easier for people to register, and they dispel a lot of misconceptions. So so that's really important. And then there's also the misconception that if you're an organ donor, you can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery, but that is absolutely not true. You can be buried on consecrated land, even if you're an organ donor. And that all kind of comes back to mutilation of the body. Is it mutilation of the body if you donate organs? And the answer is no. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. There's also the concern for something called tahara, which is when a Jew dies, there's a very specific process for the preparation of the body for burial. It has to be done in a very dignified way. It has to be done very quietly and very quickly. And there's usually a lot of psalms that are that are said during this process. And the Halachic Organ Donor Society, as well as many other, sort of Jewish organizations, talk to people and train people how to both observe the laws of Tahorah and also provide for effective and quick organ donation. So they don't have to be sort of mutually exclusive. You can do both of these things. And then I want to bring a couple of sort of modern, what are called responsa, I guess, or Jewish legal answers to questions. And these are both written by a man named Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who is a 20th century American rabbi. And a lot of what he has written and sort of made decrees about have been taken as sort of the halakha for modern times, mostly for liberal modern Orthodox Jews. So the question is that he's discussing is a very long answer that he gives, but the question is, are you able to sacrifice a limb in order to save someone else's life? And he goes through a long discussion, but eventually he talks about organ donation. And in this case, he's talking about, he starts by talking about being a living donor, but then he goes into when the family has to make the decision for somebody who's deceased. And what he says, I'm gonna read from my other screen what he says.
When you say the family has to make a decision, is that because the person who's dead is not able to make the decision?
Yes, so if the person, so say if you, Grayson, when you went to get your driver's license, you did not make a decision. You didn't put anything on your driver's license, right? Your family then will have to make that decision for you, okay? Yeah. But if you said no, then that's it. There's no decision made. You already made your decision. If you said yes, then your decision is made because it's a legal binding decision, right? But we still have staff that will talk to the family for reasons such as, is there anything special that we need to know to honor your loved one? Like, do we, how soon do we need to get this recovery done? Things like, is there any special prayers that you need to say? Those kinds of things. So yes.
I was just wondering because Rabbi Shapra was saying that the family has to make the decision.
Right. So if there is a case where the family has to make a decision, so Rabbi Feinstein is talking about some of the anguish that the family would feel upon having to make that decision.
Yes.
And he says, I must point out, I'm going to quote here, I must point out that the anguish a person feels at the thought of the mutilation should be counterbalanced by the knowledge that by doing so, he is saving a human life. There are those who believe it is an act of great piety even to forfeit a limb to save someone else's life. Therefore, surely it is possible to explain to the family that they should not be anguished over the mutilation, since it is not a desecration to the dead, leading as it does to the saving of a human life. So because the act of saving a life is so great that the family should view this as something beautiful that they're able to do for another person, as opposed to a loss of dignity for the deceased, or something that would anguish the deceased. Mm-hmm. He also quotes, and this is when we're talking about sort of a biblical justification for organ donation, he looks at Leviticus 19:16, which says, "Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa," do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. So when another person is, in this case, bleeding, literally bleeding, but also is in need of something that will save their life, we can't stand idly by. You know, we can't just, when we have the means to save their lives, we have to do it, because otherwise we're sort of, how do I want to say it? We are holding ourselves back from saving someone. I also want to bring one more text from Moshe Feinstein, who talks about, you know, that question of, is it desecration of the body? He talks about it again, and he says, any organ from the body of a deceased is transplanted into a living person, and thus the organ can no longer be considered an organ of the dead. It becomes a part of the living body, and the law demanding the burial of all parts of a deceased does not apply, because that organ is no longer theirs.
Right.
So thus they would be buried with all of their organs. And then a conservative rabbi, Rabbi Isaac Klein, says a transplanted organ will eventually, theoretically, be buried anyway. So that satisfies the requirement for having all of the body parts buried. So all of this is to say that Judaism really, really, really supports organ donation. So for you, Grace, and for anyone who's watching this at a later time, if you're not registered, Audrey, you said this in our recorded interview, but there's no age limit to registering to be an organ donor. So if you have the ability to, please do.
Save another
Yep, and you can, I mean, we have tons of resources on our website too, which is lifepassiton.org. Yeah, so check us out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Yes.
Yes, I was always thinking that you shouldn't touch the body. You know, you should keep the body, like you said. You know, it's the dignity of the body. But yeah, then nobody could be saved if everybody felt the same way.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Again, I was so impressed by that lung that just suddenly popped open. Pink, so pink and beautiful, like a balloon that you just, it was amazing. Yeah, I'll never forget. You know, some images stay in
That's
your head
right.
forever. I'll never forget that. Yeah. So, well, I guess
Well, thank you for taking the time out. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Ms. Holtzman.
Yes.
And, good luck with getting a lot